Our aging population. When we think about an aging population, we tend to think it's all about people getting older. Actually, it's also about having less people in the younger generation. But let me just show you this picture. This picture is a diagram. In the dark bar is where we are in 2010, with all the different bits in the age groups of the population. So what you can see here is this dip of currently hitting about 10, where we have less and less kids. So when we talk about an aging population, what we're also saying is that sometimes we have less kids. As societies get developed, people have less children. Appears to be the way that it goes. So what you have is less children, and that tips the population to be older. Because if people are living a bit longer and there are less young people, the average age is going to make it older for the society as a whole. When the Queen came to the throne in 1953, she started this habit of sending a telegram. You can't do it anymore, to people who reached 100. I think in her first year she sent about 100 telegrams. She now used to send telegrams. I don't know what she does instead. It's well over 10,000 people who live to the age of 100 now. So we're also getting a lot more people living into what you might call super old age. Put that all together and you get this chart that actually looks like it should be modern art. But what it's basically saying is if you go back to 2008, about 20% of the population are over the age of 60, and then it's increasing to about 30% by about 2033. More older people in the population, and younger people staying fairly stable as much as a result of immigration. Okay, but we're also changing the way we have babies. This is the fertility rate. I was fascinated by this one because this chart here is people in Northern Ireland who have had a massive decrease to come up with the rest of the UK. And I don't know if this is an unexpected dividend of the peace process. However, what you can see here is that we are having under 2 babies per person, okay, on average. Put some of those changes together and this is what happens. You have people who are getting married later, often having babies later, having babies more spaced out, and what you discover is that if you get to, let's say, the age of 50, in 1992, only under 20% of women who had kids in 1992, only about 20% had a child still living at home when they got to 50, okay? However, by 2009, that figure had pretty much doubled. So the whole shift of babies is getting later, okay? Now what that means is that women, therefore, are having babies later. So that period pre-baby is particularly important. And it's particularly important because it means it is longer for people. It may be you're going to have your first child at the age of 32 or 33 or 34. So you have a much bigger period to think about volunteering. But actually you don't necessarily think about volunteering, which is completely bizarre, I know. Some people think about other things other than volunteering before they get married and have children. But it does mean also this shift in which we tend to think of perhaps older women whose families have left home and so on. They are just going to be older before they get to the stage in which the kids have left home. So traditionally, if we think about volunteers as being on the older side, kids have left home, actually, they are not going to be quite as able to do that. So we need to think about younger people for volunteering simply because the demographics of society is changing. We are also dying older, as we said too, and what we've got here is the number of people dying from 1976, when about 700,000 people died, to 2009, when about 550, and the death rate across all ages was simply getting people to live longer. So, what have we got so far? We've got people living longer, we've got people who are changing the way they get married, they're getting married later, they're having slightly less children, and they're having children later than they do have them. What about the changing relationship with home? Well, interestingly, it's a two-way thing. What you've got here is people who are giving help to their parents. Okay, we tend to think of this as being a lot about parents giving help to children. We'll come on to that. But this is also about people giving help to their parents. So what you can see here is that red bar is people 16 to 24, 55 to 64 is people whose parents are of that age. And so what you've got here is about 40% of 16 to 24-year-olds say they do something to help their parents. My 15-year-old daughter is clearly waiting to get onto this chart, because currently at the moment she's at 0 in terms of any kind of help around the home. But we're waiting for 16, and then suddenly she's going to leap into life, I'm hoping, and realise. My 18-year-old son, I think, is beyond hope. However, what you're seeing is people increasingly helping their parents with personal affairs, 55 to 64, providing or cooking meals for parents who are 55 to 64, washing, ironing or cleaning. Fascinating here, they do it quite a lot and then they come back into it as well. Financial help, help with personal needs, and so on. And the none and above, there are quite a few of those in the 16 to 24. However, what this means is that we have people who are doing more for their parents at the same time as their parents are doing more for them. So you have this much more complicated relationship with your parents. So whereas traditionally often what happened is that people left home, they kind of came back to social stuff and so on. As people stay at home longer, they clearly should be doing more for their parents, they clearly are doing more for their parents, but also they may be looking after their parents' affairs. They may be helping with stuff like, oh, Dad, I think you should be getting a computer now. Have you thought about emails? They may be thinking about money because they're worried that those parents may not have thought about long-term care of the elderly and so on. But at the same time, kids, in particular, are looking at stuff to do with what they should be getting from their parents. So I feel comfortable discussing financial matters with friends and family. So this is a chart of people who agree strongly and agree. And what you can see is that young people are particularly happy to discuss financial affairs with friends and family. And we're going to see a bit more of that. But the young people in particular are saying, yeah, actually I discuss these things. So we've changed from a generation in which particularly financial matters you didn't necessarily talk about, and particularly young people feel much more comfortable. And often that starts with loans as well. People getting loans when they were children, going off to university and so on. I don't know if any of you living at home or otherwise recognise this kind of picture. This living at home longer actually works in a whole range of ways. This guy in the top right-hand corner says, I'm still at home with my parents, but would love to move out and go to them. The only stumbling block is the money it would cost. And right now, I'd sooner be out having fun with my mates than worrying about rent and bills. I'm not sure if I'm totally prepared, as I've never really given it much thought. So that was a male, aged 20. Now I feel like I'm completely independent, but still feel like I'm not too prepared to live alone. Sometimes bills confuse me, or financial stuff, so then I call my parents, female, aged 22. The umbilical cord is very long, and what you will also discover is that parents may go on providing for their children into the children's late 20s and even early 30s and so on. So we are changing the way that we have children, and we're changing the nature of the relationship with them. My oldest child has been looking at universities, and one of the complete changes that we've noticed is that when I went to university 30 years ago, my parents were virtually uninvolved. I'd go home and say, I'm thinking about doing this course, and they go, that sounds nice, dear, and so on. Now, between me and my wife, we have been to 7 university opening. We have been to 7 university opening days. I don't even remember university opening days 30 years ago, let alone parents coming. My son went to one of them on his own, and he said out of the 25 kids there, he thought there were only 2 of them who didn't have their parents with them. Okay? A complete generational shift. And this is what's called, does anyone know what these people are called? What parents like us are now called? We're called helicopter parents, because we're always hovering in the background, trying to make sure everything's going to be all right for our darling loved ones. We're going to open days, we're getting involved, we're working out the debts. My wife spent hours looking, and our youngest is just doing GCSEs, and we're already beginning to think, well, what should she do for A-level? But way before she does, because we've become helicopter parents. And we partly do that because actually we know that in a world that is increasingly tough with all those things, actually those choices, getting them right, getting a child in university is harder than ever before. And they will still end up probably living at home, and they will still end up with huge amounts of debt and so on.